Hi there, welcome to I'll Knit If I Want To. I'm Andrea Mowry of Andrea Renee Knits, and this is a little weekly podcast where I try my best to answer some of your fiber arts questions. Today I am wearing an oldie but a goodie. I'm wearing my stone crop pullover. This has got to be from a long time ago. I can't remember which year it was, but it's one of the Rhinebeck sweaters we did. I think it was maybe just the second year. And we did a pullover and a cardigan. And we even had these cute little like best friend pins that was like, it was two hearts and it had the stone crop sweater on it. And so like if you and your friend both knit the sweater for the meetup, you could like share the pins. Anyways, memories. Let's get into some questions. The yarn is Magpie Fibers and Spin Cycle Yarns. Okay. Question number 1. I started this year with a really big clean out of my apartment. It was needed. But I found so many whips, work in progress, some almost a year old. My question is, do you also have those whips or do you stay on top of all your whips? Do you ever have a big clean out and frog party afterwards? So generally speaking, I don't tend to have a lot of languishing whips. I think that's just because of the nature of designing. If something's not working, I pull it out and move on. But I did have a big clean out party a couple months ago, and the languishing whips I did have were like 5 years old. So thankfully, actually, I had one of my shawls almost, I was knitting it for the second time, and I just lost steam towards the end and had moved on to, new designs. And thankfully, one of my friends was happy to take that whip over so that they could have it. So I passed it on to them. And then I had, I think, one other shawl that sadly the design just didn't work out, and I think it had hurt my heart that it didn't work out. So it took me a while to undo that one and put it to rest. But otherwise, I'm looking around like, do I have anything just hanging out unfinished? Not really. I do think it's good to check on that, especially like once a year, even just for moth prevention. You don't want to have a lot of projects lying dormant in a bag that's not getting shuffled around, because that might be a lovely little spot for some moths to go make some babies. So moving everything around, looking through them is definitely a good move. And yeah, if it's languishing, if you lost your love for it, if it's not turning out the way you thought it would, if the yarn's just no fun to knit, whatever it is, then move on from it. Life's too short. Let's knit things that bring us joy. Okay. Question number 2. In one of your past episodes, you mentioned your preferred way of adding a new ball of yarn for non-superwash animal fibers, such as wool, was the spit-and-splice. Yes, ma'am. I am very pro spit-and-splice. And for superwash wool and non-animal fibers, you would introduce the new ball as though you were doing color work, knitting a stitch with the new ball, then one with the old, etc., going back and forth for a few stitches. My question is, what would be your preferred method to add a new ball of superwash wool yarn to a project that is designed to be reversible, like your Harlow hat, for example? I'd love to hear your thoughts. So if I'm doing superwash, I would still do the same thing, unless it's like looking very obvious, and then I just wouldn't alternate stitches. I would just drop the old yarn and start carrying the new. What you're going to have to be careful with is what you do with the ends that are left over. So that's kind of more the piece to think about as far as joining that new yarn. So the good news is when it comes to brioche, it's actually really, the way we weave in ends works out quite well with its reversibility. For a non-brioche project, I usually always weave in ends using duplicate stitch. There's loads of videos out there on the interwebs you can find to see how that's done if you're not familiar with duplicate stitch. but I think that's what I would do even if you were going to be able to see both sides of the work, because I just think it's tidy. It locks in the ends really nicely. Now for something like brioche, this is a swatch I had on my wall. So I pulled this off because it has this little bit of brioche at the bottom. So the nice thing about weaving ends in brioche is that after some people find brioche to be a little trickier, it tends to be a more advanced technique. And I always like to say in my classes when I teach brioche is we are rewarded at the end of brioche with it having the easiest weave ends to weave in out of anything. So all you do is you're going to look at your little swatch. So if I'm coming up close, and this could be anywhere, it could be in the middle of my project here, wherever I ran out of colors, but I'm just going to do it on the edge where it is. So what you're going to do is if you stretch this open, you're going to see what I call the fish bones. So do you see these diagonal red lines right here? That's what I call the fish bones, because it kind of looks like if you were to try and draw fish bones. So what you do is you just run your tail under the color that matches what you're trying to weave in. So if I was trying to weave in white, I would want to flip my work to this side because that's where my fishbone lines, see those diagonal white guys? That's where they're white. On the other side, they're red. So I'm doing red, so I want to be on this side. If your tail is not on that side, just go ahead, thread it on a tapestry needle and pull it through to the correct side. And then all you're going to do is run your tapestry needle underneath the fishbone. So I'm just going to thread mine in so I can show you. Focus, there she is. See, so I just ran it right under. Boop, and then all you do, just pull that tail on through. And then I like to pull it a little bit extra, snip off the waist, and then tug it back in, and it'll just hide right under those fishbone lines. So on my white, I've got a white one over here. And so if you would have two ends in the middle of a project. So I would just choose one column of fish bones for one tail. There she is. And then one for the other tail in the middle of your work. For a little extra securing, if you want to, if you had to add in that yarn mid round or row, you could even do like one duplicate stitch through the column just to kind of secure it. You could kind of cross the two tails, boop, and then have them go into the other sides, the other columns on the other side of that stitch, just for a little extra security. But again, so on this side, under my little white fish bones, and you will not be able to see it on the other side. So just pull it on through. And we are all good. So that is how I would do it. All right. So again, you could, when you join that new yarn, you could still alternate stitches for a little bit, even in brioche, if you want. It's more about how you're going to weave in ends to hide them well so that you can't see them when you reverse the hat or whatever you're working on. All right. This is a silly question, but you can answer it quickly. What are those pieces of fabric hanging from the circular shelf behind you? They're up there. Let me see if I can tilt this. Let's see if I can focus it over there. I've been wondering since they showed up. So basically that's just a garland. It is a little fabric scrap garland that was dyed different colors of pink. A lot of the pink's faded. It's mostly white now. That I got, so I taught at Squam a few times. I loved it. It's a wonderful, fun, crafty retreat. And they do an art fair at the end. Like a little, is art fair the right word? Market. Craft market. There we go. And that is one of the sellers. Unfortunately, I cannot remember the name of them. Maybe one of you will recognize it. They do all kinds of really cute things. But I got that one, and then I have a rainbow one, and the rainbow one's in my daughter's room. But they're just these cute little scrap garlands. They're really, really fun. So that's all that is. Okay, I would love to knit the Traveler Shell, but unfortunately the recommended yarns are cost prohibitive for me at this time. I have some yarn that has been in my stash for a long time. It's a silky mohair and some Knit Picks Shadow that I would love to get used up. I'm not sure if they would work. The Knit Pick Shadow is 100% merino and the Sundara yarn is 60% mohair and 40% silk. I'm afraid the silk might make the garment too drapey for me. What's your opinion? So, should I just go for it and see how it turns out or save to get the suggested yarn? I say use what you got and if it works. So, the only way to really know if it is going to be too drapey for you is by knitting a swatch. And I would knit a sizable swatch so you can really see the drape of it. So knit a swatch in the recommended stitch pattern, wash it, dry it, and then see how drapey it is. Hold it up against you. Do you like that drape? I think that with the mohair, it's probably would be just fine. It does have a higher silk content than a lot of mohair silks that I have seen or worked with. So there might be a little bit more drape, but you've also got that 100% merino that you're holding it with. So I don't think it'll be too drapey. And I think that cardigan, a little drape is nice with that cardigan, but swatching is going to be what gives you your answer. So do a swatch, see what you think. And if it works out, sweet, then you already have the yarn you need and you can cast on party. So I would definitely try it out by swatching. Next question. My question today is about the fit of knitted garments. My husband likes fitted sweaters, especially around the shoulder area. I have made him different seamless sweaters, top down, bottom up, raglans, round yoke, drop shoulder, you name it. His favorite sweater is still the one I knit in pieces. He says the fit in the armpits and in the shoulders is the best. However, I do not enjoy sewing up knitted garments and was wondering whether there's a way of getting a fit of set-in sleeves, but in a seamless sweater. I have tried modifications and I'm hopeless at this point. He's a very knit-worthy person and I'd like to knit more for him. Any thoughts would be greatly appreciated, as I'm not looking forward to knitting garments in pieces and sewing them together. So the one thing I thought of is, yes, there is absolutely a way to do set-in sleeves without seaming them in. Because that's what I'm wondering, is if what he likes about it is the set-in sleeve nature of it. I've definitely met people who just prefer a set-in sleeve over any other style. So if you're kind of newer to sweaters, right now I'm wearing a round yoke. Raglans are kind of that sweatshirt style that have the seams right here. And set-in sleeves are what you would find in most ready-to-wear sweaters, and they usually have a seam that comes right here and kind of curves down, and they tend to be more tailored to a specific body size. That can be one of the tricky things I have found with set-in sleeves, is they really have to fit. The dimensions really have got to fit your body well for them to look as they should and to be comfortable. So what I would do if I were you, I don't know a ton about the men's patterns that already exist out there, but what I'm wondering is if you did find a set-in sleeve pattern, you could adapt it to being seamless with this little book. So this is Top Down, Reimagining Set-in Sleeve Design by Elizabeth Doherty, and it's fantastic. It is a fantastic book. I think Elizabeth is so clever. I have one sweater that is set-in sleeve top down. It was actually my first sweater. It's white pine, and it uses a very similar method to what Elizabeth does in here. So basically what you do is you pick up stitches all around that arm area, and you then work short rows to build up your sleeve cap. And that's how you create the look of a set-in sleeve. So this is what a set-in sleeve, can you see that? How it comes right to the shoulder edge. And I'm just trying to see if I can show you in a clearer picture. So that's how you could do that seamlessly. So that's what I would try. I would see if there are any set and sleeve patterns out there that you love, and then you could just adapt. Because I do also think that as far as seaming sweaters go, seaming sides, seaming down the sleeve, a lot of that's pretty easy peasy. What can be a little tricky is seaming in the set-in sleeve, because you kind of have to zhuzh everything perfectly into place. So I get it. So yeah, give that a try and see what you think. And I'll link the book. It would definitely make it that modification way easier to have the guides of Elizabeth. Okay. I have recently started knitting your pink fizz sweater. I know that it is often suggested to alternate skeins when knitting with hand-dyed yarn. I was wondering what you do when it comes to knitting something like this, where you are holding two different types of yarn together. Do you alternate both skeins, or maybe just the fingering weight and not worry about the lace weight, or maybe you don't alternate at all because of holding two together? Just curious what you do or suggest. So I will admit, I do not like having to alternate skeins. It's one of my pet peeves, and I avoid it if I can. So I will say, from recent experience, there are times when you've just got to do it, because otherwise you're going to all of a sudden have a hard line of color change. Even if it's from the same dye lot, it's just the way that some yarn is dyed. Some of it's dyed in like a big pot, and some areas just absorb more of the color than others. And so you can still have that variation in color. So if I do that, I just stripe it. I go every other row and I alternate the two skeins. There are all kinds of ways people do it. A lot of people have their preferred way. That's how I do it. It's simple, it's effective, it works. For a sweater like Pink Fizz, I think that there's a pretty good chance you're not even gonna have to worry about it, because of the fact that you're holding two strands of yarn together. So you already have some color variation, because even if you're using the same colorway on both bases, because they're different, silk takes color a lot differently than wool. And mohair, like, they're all going to take that color differently. So even if they're the same colorway, there might be quite a bit of difference between your two yarns. And I think that alone is going to hide variation from skein to skein. If you are worried about it, yeah, the world's your oyster. You could really decide how you want to do that. You could just do a few stripes at the end of each skein before you start the new skein to kind of help fade out or dull any transition to the next skein. You could just alternate one or the other. If it were me, I think I would only alternate like the fingering weight yarn, and then I would just stay with the same skein of mohair the whole time or something like that, just to make it easier on myself. But yeah, whatever works well for you. One thing I will say is, if you are alternating skeins, take care with your beginning of round if you're working in the round. Because what can happen is you're basically creating almost a little seam going up that beginning of round as you carry the other yarn up. And so you'll have this line, and if you pull that too tight, it's going to create an inflexible line going up that part of the sweater. So that's just something I like to point out, because you want to not have that tight line there. Okay. You may have noticed I threw in an extra question there since we had the quickie. I wanted to balance us back out, but that is it. That is all our questions this week. It's a little bit of a shorter episode. I was actually peering back into my older episodes, and some of them are like 13 minutes, and nowadays I'm like, they can get to be a half an hour, 45 minutes. I'm like, am I getting too chatty? Do I gotta trim these back a little bit? Do y'all have time for all the things I want to talk about? So anyways, we'll just keep this one a little shorter this week, but I hope that you have a fantastic weekend, if that is when you're watching this. Enjoy some making. I am planning to get in the kitchen. I'm gonna do some cooking and some meal prep. And I also am definitely going to make time for some spinning and some knitting. I just finished a new sweater design that I am so excited about. And I'm about to start another. I'm going to celebrate by casting on another one of a different design, new design. But I was giggling to myself because I'm like, I just finished that one, and that's how I'm going to celebrate, by starting another. So have a great weekend. I hope you get to make something, even if it's just some wonderful memories with the people you love. And I hope to see you back here next week. Bye.